conversation around Hancock 2 has been building for years, with fans constantly asking whether the story of the world's most troubled superhero would ever return to the screen. The renewed excitement has grown because people feel that the original movie left behind a lot of unresolved threads, especially the mysterious history of immortal beings, the complicated bond between Hancock and Mary, and the consequences of a world discovering that superheroes aren't just modern accidents, but ancient forces walking among humans for centuries. As discussions intensified, rumors began flowing about a sequel taking shape in a direction far more emotional and mythological than before, giving audiences a sense that the second chapter might finally reveal answers that were only hinted at previously. What sparked the most interest was the idea that this new installment would explore not only Hancock's past, but also the deeper costs of his powers, the origins of his loneliness, and the fragile line between being a savior and being a threat. In the eyes of a society still unsure how to handle someone like him, whispers spread about the creative team, shaping a story focused heavily on Hancock's struggle to adapt to a world that has begun to rely heavily on superheroes, yet still fears them. People close to early development supposedly described a tone that is more mature, showing Hancock attempting to rebuild his identity now that he is no longer the careless, destructive figure he once was. Instead, he is trying to redefine what it means to be a hero without abandoning the reckless personality that made him stand out in the first place. Throughout these discussions, it became clear that the sequel wasn't aiming to repeat the comedic chaos of the first film, but instead build on it, taking the grounded emotional moments and evolving them into something grand and far-reaching. There were talks about deeper themes: destiny, isolation, immortality, and the burden of being chosen without wanting to be. Every new rumor added more fuel to the anticipation, pushing fans to imagine a film even bigger, darker, and more character-driven than the original. Much of the excitement surrounding Hancock 2 comes from the idea that it would finally explore the history of the ancient bond that once tied Hancock and Mary together. Fans speculated that the sequel would dive into how many pairs like them once existed, how many had been destroyed by time, and whether other immortals still walk the world unnoticed. Early whispers teased new characters who share the same celestial origins, individuals with similar powers but wildly different philosophies about how those abilities should be used. Some versions of the rumored plot suggested that these immortals wouldn't necessarily be allies but instead represent a threat, tied to Hancock's own past, forcing him to confront memories he has forgotten or never understood. This angle created a sense that Hancock 2 might deliver a surprising mixture of action, emotional turmoil, and historical flashbacks that span centuries, giving viewers a fuller picture of how these powerful beings shaped human civilization before. Retreating into the shadows, the supposed storyline that caught the most attention centered on Hancock's attempt to live a quieter life after the events of the first movie. Once seen as a public menace, he now tries to reshape how people view him, even as he struggles with the overwhelming weight of expectations. Instead of being universally loved, Hancock finds that the world still sees him as unpredictable, dangerous, and emotionally unstable, despite his ongoing efforts to change. This makes his journey more compelling because the conflict isn't only external but deeply internal. He's fighting not just villains but the remnants of his own past behavior. Rumors suggest the film begins with Hancock taking on smaller missions, trying to stay under the radar, hoping to avoid triggering fear or political backlash. But as larger, mysterious events begin unfolding around the globe, he is forced back into the spotlight in ways he never wanted, pulling him deeper into a conflict tied to his forgotten origins. Talk around the cast sparked additional excitement, as fans repeatedly insisted that the energy of the original performers was essential for the sequel. Imaginary production updates suggested efforts to reunite the core cast, while also bringing in new faces to portray immortals who have been hiding in plain sight across different regions of the world. These characters were described as having diverse backgrounds and conflicting beliefs about how their kind should interact with humanity. Some early fictional discussions painted them as guardians observing the world from a distance, while others framed them as bitter figures who see humans as fleeting creatures unworthy of protection. This clash of ideologies would set the foundation for dramatic confrontations that reach beyond the physical battles and into philosophical debates about fate, evolution, and the responsibility of power. One of the more intriguing rumored elements involved Hancock's emotional state as he tries to cope with the idea that immortality isn't just a gift, it's a curse that isolates him from everything he tries to protect. According to the imagined updates, the sequel amplifies the tragedy of his existence by introducing a character who embodies everything Hancock could become if he gives in to bitterness. This antagonist, another immortal, supposedly shares Hancock's abilities but lacks his empathy, making them a dark reflection of what Hancock might have turned into after centuries of loss and confusion. Their arrival forces Hancock to confront questions he has avoided for years. Why was he given his powers? Why was he separated from Mary for so long? Why does fate seem determined to push them apart whenever they get close? This emotional and psychological tension is said to be at the heart of the story, giving the film a tone that blends action with introspection. Rumors around the action sequences suggested a shift toward more grounded, destructive, emotionally driven battles rather than purely comedic chaos. Instead of just showcasing super strength and flight, the sequel was imagined as using these powers to explore how immortals shape the environment around them, the storms they cause when angered, the shockwaves created when they clash, and the subtle ways their presence affects the natural world. These sequences were said to feel heavier, more dramatic, and more symbolic, reflecting the internal struggles of the characters. Fans envisioned breathtaking confrontations set in abandoned deserts, ancient ruins, and modern cities, each location tied to the mythology of immortal beings who once walked the earth freely. These large-scale battles would serve as the visual centerpiece of the film, raising the stakes higher than anything seen in the original. Discussions about the tone suggested a careful balance between the humor that made Hancock memorable and the deeper storytelling that could give the sequel longevity. Imagined behind-the-scenes talks emphasized keeping Hancock's sarcastic personality intact, but integrating it into a narrative that pushes him to mature emotionally without losing the edge that defines him. Instead of leaning too heavily on comedy or drama, the sequel aimed to blend both in a way that mirrors real personal growth, messy, inconsistent, sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking. This created hopes that Hancock 2 would deliver not just action-packed scenes, but a more refined emotional evolution for a character who, beneath the jokes and the destruction, has always carried a heavy burden. As fictional release expectations circulated among fans, the idea was that the film would be positioned as a major blockbuster, a return to the world of a unique superhero concept that blends mythological depth with modern themes. There was excitement about how the film would fit into the evolving landscape of superhero cinema, which has increasingly leaned into multiverses, high stakes, and interconnected narratives. But Hancock 2 was imagined as something different, a standalone story that doesn't depend on external universes, but instead thrives on expanding its own mythology. This independence is what many believed would set it apart and give it a fresh identity among a sea of sequels and reboots. Speculation about the trailer fueled even more excitement, with fans imagining footage that blends mysterious imagery of ancient temples, stormy skies, and close-up shots of Hancock burdened by questions he no longer wants to avoid. The hypothetical trailer would tease new characters, show brief glimpses of intense battles, and deliver emotional moments that hint at Hancock facing a destiny he never asked for. People envisioned a tone that feels grand and mysterious, with slow-building tension that explodes into action in the final moments. It would serve as a reminder that Hancock is not just a comedic anti-hero, but an immortal force with a story far larger than the modern world realizes. Through all these imagined updates and discussions, the anticipation for Hancock 2 continues to grow because the story has always had untapped potential. The mix of mythology, grounded emotion, and unpredictable superhuman behavior creates a space where the sequel could expand on themes rarely explored in mainstream superhero films. Fans remain excited not because of confirmed details, but because The concept itself is rich with possibilities, whether exploring ancient civilizations, forgotten wars, or the consequences of immortality. The sequel represents a chance to give Hancock the depth, complexity, and cinematic weight that many felt was only beginning to emerge in the first movie. If the fictional development surrounding Hancock 2 becomes reality one day, viewers are expecting a powerful story that blends spectacle with meaning.